So this is a Cambridge Audio CXA60, and we looked at the 80 before, but this is the lower power version. And this unit powers up okay, and we can flick through any of the inputs we like. It's all good, and there's no errors shown in the front panel. You know, when we looked at the CXA80, we saw errors on the front panel that turned out to be nonsense. It turned out that the sort of protection circuitry was the actual problem. But here it tells us everything's okay. However, the report with this one is that it doesn't output any audio, but it does output a sort of a screeching sound. Just a squeal comes through the loudspeakers, but no audio at all. And that doesn't matter what channel it's on, what input it's on, anything like that. So we're connected to the scope here, and if we turn up the volume, then we see indeed we've got this kind of sawtooth waveform going on here, and it's somewhere maybe about 300 Hertz, and it varies with the volume control. So that tells us that the power amp is actually okay. You know, we're getting output there, and the volume control is acting on that. So whatever's happening here must be on the preamp side of things. So let's get the covers off and we'll have a look at that circuitry and see if we can find out what's going on with this one. So when we realise that the problem is on the preamp side, and it's on all channels for all inputs, then I'm suspecting that the supply lines to some of these op amps at the front of the unit here, this is a preamp board here, and there's a whole bunch of 5532 op amps on there. So I'm suspecting that there's something not happy there on the supply lines. And when I was taking the unit apart, I could feel that this heatsink here, even in the short time I had the unit running there, this heatsink was hot. This is the heatsink with the plus and minus 15 volt regulators on it, and we saw this before. We had a problem with the minus rail. So I've not even powered it up or checked any of these supplies yet, but what we're going to do is just check the resistance to ground on both these supplies. So if I go between ground and my plus 15, I'm reading 800 ohms there, so that's fine. When I go to the minus rail, I'm reading a short, and this is exactly the problem we had with the previous CXA80 unit. And if I remove the cable to this control board, so this board is then isolated. Now that's not quite true because we have got some other cables going down here, so we'll see what happens when we remove it. But when I remove the main supply line, I've still got a short there. So unless it's to do with some of these other cables going off this board, I'm suspecting we've got a problem on this board again. And I'll be curious to see if it's the same capacitor problem we had with the last one. So let's get that board out and we'll have a look at that. I took this board out and I just went and looked straight away at the ceramic capacitors that we had a problem with last time. Just looked at these under the microscope. And so this is one of the op amp decoupling caps, and you can see there's a definite sort of, looks like a stress mark or something on this capacitor here. Seems intact, but you know, there's a mark there that just doesn't seem normal. You generally wouldn't expect to see that. So that's on one of them. And then on the other device, we actually, this is very clear, we can see there's a clear kind of splinter type fracture going on there, and so I suspect one or both of these capacitors has gone short, and this one here is in the exact same spot as we had the problem with the previous unit, so that's very interesting. So we're going to take these parts out now and we'll measure the resistance and see just if these are the source of the problem here. So that's these two capacitors out, and this one actually reads alright, or doesn't read a short anyway, and this second one here, this is the one that looked like it had more of a splinter on the ceramic, and again it's a dead short. So that's exactly the same capacitor, exactly the same position as we saw in the last unit. So that seems hard to believe that's a coincidence. You know, there's something maybe kind of systematic there, and it's maybe like the pick and place machine that puts that component on the board. It's maybe not set right, or you know, something along that lines that's damaging that. So it'll be interesting to see if we see any more of these in the future just with this exact fault. But it's been very quick to find this one, obviously, because we've done it before. So I'll go and replace these capacitors now. We'll put the unit back together and see if that solves our problems. So we replaced these parts, then the board's back in. I'm just going to check the plus and minus 15 volt rails here. It's all powered up. And so there's the plus 15, and the interesting thing with that is it's a little bit low, and if we remember on the CXA60 we had to, it was 15 point something, and we had to reduce it slightly to stop the protection circuitry just triggering, and so it's interesting that this one's below the 15 volts. There's maybe that's maybe a deliberate thing to you know, place some of the levels in the right place. And then if we go and look at the minus rail, it's just on the minus 15 volts there, 14.9. So that's all good now, that board's all working, and the amplifier's playing alright. So we'll go and put the covers on and run it for a while to see how we go on. So we're all back together then, and I mean, this has not been a very different video, given it's been an identical fault to what we looked at before. But I guess it's just interesting to see that you get two different units, even two different models, and they've got an identical problem with that tiny part on a surface mount board here. And the other thing that's interesting is that the symptoms of the same fault were very different. You know, in the previous unit it just flagged up a fault in the front panel and then it wouldn't do anything, whereas this one actually turned on and was you know, doing this kind of funny oscillation on the output. But anyway, we're all up and running now and we've got a source connected, so let's just play some music.
It's at my beck and call. Why do I live my life alone, with nothing at all but